Silicon Valley saw major changes this year, from new technology that filters out hate speech on social media to push for gender equality. This morning, we are highlighting some of the biggest stories and new developments we covered in 2017 as we take a look back at a year in tech. Apple's new flagship iPhone is the most expensive phone it has ever produced.
We call this Face ID.
Facebook revealed Russian agents bought roughly 3,000 ads for about $100,000 during the 2016 campaign.
I don't want anyone to use our tools to undermine democracy.
We have created tools that are ripping apart the social fabric of how society works.
They've spent the last year trying to make Instagram nicer.
Uber promises an urgent investigation into sexual harassment claims.
I've had lots of conversations over the years with women who told me horror stories about being sexually harassed in Silicon Valley.
Equifax is dealing with fallout this morning over its massive data breach.
You may be wondering why it took Uber a year to disclose the stolen data.
Their belief was, okay, we'll pay them, they'll delete it, everything will be fine.
Alexa, how many tablespoons are in 3/4 cup?
We say things and they hear things that we really wouldn't want everywhere. I think we should be cautious.
As you just saw, CBS News contributor and Wired editor-in-chief Nicholas Thompson covered these stories for us throughout the year. He's looking forward to what we can expect in 2018. Nick, good morning.
Good morning, Norah.
I know we're wrapping up the year, looking forward. One of the things we have to deal with, though, is we saw Google, Facebook, Twitter all testify before Congress about Russian interference in our elections. Where does that take us?
Well, there's going to be that specific investigation will go further, but what I think it really shows is it shows there has been or is a moral reckoning ongoing right now with the tech industry, where they're really thinking about the influence they've had on the world, the influence they have on us, and a lot of that was triggered by the influence they had on the election, where they thought, wait a second, were we responsible for the hostility in the election? Were we responsible for what happened? And that has caused a lot of introspection.
You heard, you heard Tim Cook, the head of Apple, use the words, I think maybe for the first time, moral responsibility.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. You've seen them all talking about their moral responsibility. And you saw just this week, Facebook saying, you know, we've been studying whether social media is good for you. I mean, that's crazy, right? That Facebook is actually saying, oh, we're going to take a look back and we're going to decide whether the thing we do is good. It turns out it is if you use it actively. It's not if you use it passively. It was a pretty interesting study they put out.
So do you think that Silicon Valley is now becoming more introspective and taking stock?
Yes, absolutely. I think that is the biggest shift between this year and last year. In the old days, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, there were lots of people on the outside saying, hey, Silicon Valley, you're the most powerful companies in the world. You change the way we relate to each other. You change everything about our lives. Think about it seriously. And they're saying, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then this year...
For so long, they denied that they had that kind of influence and impact.
And they don't deny it anymore.
Yeah.
What about sexual harassment in Silicon Valley?
So you saw it starting to come out. You saw people starting to get in trouble. The thing that actually I think captivates Silicon Valley and is the most important is gender equity, because the algorithms that are being written now will shape all of these platforms and all of this technology. And if all the algorithms are written by men, then you have a big problem, because that's the technology that shapes society down the road. So it's actually, sexual harassment is a big issue, but it's not quite like the way it works in media. It's happening at a slightly different level.
This is so interesting, because this is really Jodi Kantor's point in the New York Times about exposing everything. It's who writes the stories, who writes the narrative, who makes the decisions, who's the engineers who write the code and all that stuff. And that's a really interesting way to think about all of this.
Right, because if you write an algorithm and it's based on an image set, and the image set has a bunch of stock images and all the people who it sees in a kitchen are women, right? Then it writes an algorithm for the way a robot will act. And then suddenly you have robots acting based on this gender-biased data set, and you've got huge problems down the road. So you need somebody to stop that at some point, and it's more likely a woman will notice that. So that's like a very simple explanation of a complex problem, but it's something Silicon Valley is thinking about a lot now.
New rules for Twitter.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Gayle.
New rules for Twitter to curb hate.
Yes.
What does that mean for the future of Twitter?
Well, I mean, Twitter has a really hard problem in curbing hate, based on the culture, based on the structure of the system, based on how easy it is to set up anonymous accounts. Well, Instagram, one of the big things in the year was all these companies trying to curb hate. Instagram has a much easier time doing it than Twitter, because Twitter is a much more open, fast-moving political forum. Instagram, it's much subtler.
But Twitter says they're going to suspend users.
Yeah, starting today. If you're associated with the hate group, you're gone. So that's going to be interesting how they define hate group and who they knock off there.
All right.
Going to get messy.
There goes that's that moral responsibility.
There it is. Yep. All right. Nick Thompson, thanks so much for being with us.